In 1890, William James published The Principles of Psychology, a 2-volume, 1,400-page work that most psychologists still regard as the greatest book ever written in the field. The chapter on the will is among its most extraordinary sections, because James begins with a question almost no one thinks to ask: what actually happens in the moment between deciding to act and acting? The common answer is that something called willpower supplies the energy that converts intention into motion. James thought this was wrong, not slightly wrong, but fundamentally wrong. The will, as ordinarily conceived, doesn't exist. There is no mysterious inner reservoir of force that you tap when you decide to get out of bed on a cold morning. What there is, James argued, is something both simpler and more interesting: the image of the action, allowed to become dominant in the mind without opposition. He called this the ideo-motor principle. The basic claim is that every mental image of a movement tends to produce that movement, automatically, unless some competing image or inhibition blocks it. When you think clearly and without conflict about raising your arm rises, not because you add a further act of will, but because the idea of the movement is itself sufficient to produce it. This is why practice skills feel effortless. The image has become so clean and so dominant that it executes without friction. The implication for failure of will is immediate. You are not failing to act because you lack willpower. You are failing to act because two images are competing for mental dominance: the image of what you want to do and the image of the comfortable alternative. The bed is warm. The alternative to getting up is present to the mind with equal or greater vividness. Nothing moves, not because will is absent, but because no image wins. The solution James proposed is not effort in the usual sense. It is attention. You attend, selectively and deliberately, to the image of the action you want to take, and you allow competing images to recede. This is not passive. It requires real mental work. But it is a specific kind of work, the work of directing consciousness, of holding one picture before the mind while releasing others. This led James to one of his most important insights: that attention is the most fundamental psychological capacity, and that its voluntary direction is the closest thing to what we ordinarily call will. The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention, over and over again, is the very root of judgment, character, and will, he wrote. An education which should improve this faculty would be the education par excellence. James also understood that will is not equally available to every type of action. Some actions can be performed once the right image is present. Others require what he called the fiat, the moment of resolution in which you cut off deliberation and let one image become final. The experience of this fiat is what we commonly call making a decision. It is the moment when the mind stops entertaining alternatives and commits. This moment is psychologically real but fragile. The image of action can be dislodged even after the fiat, a competing sensation, a distraction, a new thought, and the whole process must begin again. James saw this as the source of what he called the miserable feeling of irresolution, the state in which you have decided but not yet acted, and the decision is slowly unraveling. His prescription was to act immediately on the fiat, not tomorrow, not after breakfast, now. Every delay gives competing images time to reassemble. Every immediate action reinforces the dominance of the decision and begins building the neural structure that makes future action easier. This connects to James's broader theory of habit. Will, exercised repeatedly in the same direction, creates habit. Habit, once formed, removes the action from the domain of will altogether. It becomes automatic, effortless, something that happens rather than something you do. The goal of will is, paradoxically, its own eventual obsolescence, to create a self that does the right things without needing to decide. The moral psychology that follows from this is both demanding and encouraging. It is demanding because it locates responsibility precisely where it should be, in the quality of your attention, which is something you actually control. It is encouraging because it explains why small actions matter. Every time you act in accordance with the image you hold of the person you want to be, you make that image more dominant, more automatic, more constitutive of who you are. James believed this so completely that he made it the foundation of his ethics. Act as if what you do makes a difference, he wrote. It does. Not as inspiration, but as psychology, action reshapes the mind that produces it. You become, over time, the aggregate of what you have willed and done. Subscribe to The Psychology of William James for more of his timeless ideas.